Welcome back to another show where we pick up where we left off last week as we talked about what it means to be trauma informed, what it means to understand the traumas, the trials, the tribulations even that so many in our community are experiencing. And we did that last week and this week firsthand with someone who is a licensed social worker here in the state of Kentucky and who has experienced trauma in some real ways that she shared with us personally. She's done that through conversation, and she's also shared with us some of the experiences of her children. So we want to pick up today's show right where we left off last week. Again, welcoming back to the show Denisa Hobbs, who is here to just share with us something that will help you or maybe someone you love learn how to move forward through the grief and the trauma that so many of us have experienced, especially even over this past year. So welcome back to the show. Thank you. Picking up where we left off, one of the things I wanted to hit on is what it means to be there for your children and there for yourself. All right, so I shared last week that my mom reached up at the funeral and was like, you know, those are the reasons you're going to keep going, talking about my two children. And we had a little bit of a conversation about, you know, being an example for them with how to grieve, but also needing to just be you. Absolutely. So what does that mean for you? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
It's a wonderful question. And I didn't know when I first started. I didn't. My life encompassed being a wife and a mother and a worker in the church and a volunteer at the school. And so I really didn't know what that meant, but in therapy and doing just self-work, self-reflection, introspection, I've learned a lot about that process. But let me go back to that time. So I think I really had to hit that question head on when I first became a widow. I think I mentioned to you I cried for 76 days in a row. And I remember thinking, as much as I want to be there for them right now, I can't. I just could not. Now, while I was ensuring that they took baths and did homework, apart from that, like emotionally, I just needed to grieve. And what that looked like for me was journaling a lot and talking a lot, talking it through, and even with them. I remember one of my children did something, and I thought, oh my goodness, you look like your father right now, in a positive way. Not being afraid to share his name or say his name, but I needed those things, right? And I also had learned that it was best practice, and I felt like it was really good for me too and my children, for me to grieve in front of them, for me to cry in front of them, for me to say, I miss him. I miss, and I've had to think about, what do I miss? And that's one of the questions I ask in therapy. What do you miss? And I missed having somebody to talk to, to share life with. I missed having a co-parent. I could no longer say, just go ask your daddy. I don't want to talk about it right now. Or, I'm going to the store. I'm leaving. Like, that was no more. So there were a lot of things. I didn't just lose a husband. I lost a litany of things. So that's what that looked like. But also for them, signing them up for the camps, going to Gilda's Club every week, ensuring, too, that they did not pass the opportunity, because I really feel like it's an opportunity, it's a gift to be able to process that grief.
Now let me ask you, let me pin in that, because a couple of things came to mind. One, I've spoken to countless parents in schools over the years who have said to me, we've asked immediately, do you have them in therapy? And the response is no, they didn't want to do it. or they weren't ready for it. And very often it was the parents saying the same thing. I don't want to do it. I'm not ready for it. So did you encounter that, and how did you work through it? And then the second part of that question is, did you ever feel propelled by your children to move forward? Did you ever feel like they were saying, come on, Mom? Or did they stay in it longer maybe than you did?
I remember I was a young widow considering. I remember going to Gilda's Club, and they were about, a lot of the widows were like 50, 60, some 70. And I thought, okay, this is helpful. However, being a young widow, I remember thinking about my children. And I really, like, they were my lighthouses in this process. They are the reasons why I moved forward. But with that said, to your question, I did insist that my children attend counseling. And what I did was said, I would like for you to attend at least 3 sessions. That's what I'm asking, 3 sessions. If after that you find that you don't want to do this, I will respect that decision, because as a practicing therapist under supervision, most often therapy will work when you have a willing client, right? But I did insist that they do 3 because of the background that I had and their father had, and that this is a major loss. There is processing necessary. There is a necessary processing of this is an experience you have never been in. Somebody has just been taken out of your life. You can't tell me that a person, you're just going to wake up tomorrow and that you don't need to process that, right? So I did say 3 sessions. After that, you're good, okay? And so my children were not so happy about that. They were not. And they did the 3 sessions. I think I had one child who did the 5 sessions. And they thought, okay, Mom, I think I've done enough. They did go to the overnight grief camp, which I thought was really good. They only have children who's lost somebody in that space. And they did meaningful, what they call it, memory making, and just allowed them to do those things. And those things, that memory making, bringing a picture of him, making, I think, the lantern, a candle, all of those things, those directly involve and engage, those, that grief part, those senses, cognitively and emotionally. And so having done that, I was like, okay, that's fine. But yes, I did insist that they would do at least 3.
And did you feel like they were ever saying, move on, it's time to go?
Not for my children, because even now, they're like, Mom, okay, my oldest son, not my oldest, the second oldest, I asked him a question. He's like, Mom, I don't want to process this right now. I don't want to. So they know me.
Yes.
And so I was always processing. How you feel? What's your thought? And I don't say just how do you feel. What's your thoughts today about those? So I was always processing. So for them, I don't think so. But what I will say was that for some reason that I can't explain now, I remember thinking it is very important for me to go through this process right now. Because I know, I didn't know, but what I recognize now is that there were times now, like my son graduated graduated high school. That was a momentous occasion where there definitely could be emotions to that. My daughter is graduating. There will be occasions that they will have emotion about not having their father there. And I thankfully now I think I'm strong enough to handle that, having done a lot of that processing on the forefront, the forend of that.
Yeah, I remember one of the hardest days since my mom left was actually my daughter's graduation. And that was, almost a year later. But I was miserable, and I could not. I did everything in me to try to get through it, not to show it on that momentous day.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Why? Why not show it?
Because it was her day. It was a momentous day. She wasn't in that place. She was ready to, you know, she wanted the mom that was going to blast the music going to the graduation and, you know, just kid around with her and play. And I wanted to be that for her. And so I said I had, you know, and to some degree, I felt like, you know, this isn't fair to her on this day, you know, almost a year later, to this be the day that I'm sad. This be the day that I grieve.
I understand.
But by the grace of God, she recognized it, even still, because you can't hide it, and we were able to process it afterwards.
And the reason I asked that question is because I think it's necessary. I think we want to live in a perfect life. We want this perfection, you know, oh no, this day needs to go on and there need to be no tears and it's happy. And I have found that if I just allow myself that little time to have that moment, to grieve in that moment, it allows me to move forward in a much healthier space and place.
Absolutely.
And one of the things you asked me, what do? I have learned about self-care. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful gift to yourself. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to put a pin there because we're going to come back and talk about self-care, because that is a word that, you know, it's as common today as drinking water. Everybody's talking about self-care, so we want to share with you what that really means, what that has to do with trauma-informed, what that has to do with yourself, those that you love, and your children when we come back. So don't go anywhere.
A recent article in Newsweek cited that black colleges produce 70% of all black dentists and doctors, 50% of black engineers and public school teachers, and while HBCUs only account for 3% of the nation's colleges, they account for about 20% of the degrees awarded to African Americans. Did you know that 40% of the African American members of Congress, 50% of African American lawyers, and 80% of African American judges all graduated from an HBCU? Simmons College of Kentucky is just one of America's historically black colleges and universities that can help you pursue and realize your dreams. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
All right, welcome back to the principal's office, where my guest, Denisa Hobbs, and myself have been talking for almost 2.5 episodes now, 1.5 episodes about trauma and its effects and how you can move forward through it. We hope that we're sharing something with you that is beneficial and can help you or someone you love. And so right before the break, we were talking about self-care. And I want to go back there, but before we do, I actually want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about your late husband, Nathan. Nathan Hobbs was one heck of a guy, and I
Agreed.
You know, I'm saying that just as corny as probably he was in a lot of ways.
Agreed.
But he loved the Lord.
Indeed.
He loved his friends. He loved his family.
He did.
He was just all around a great guy, and he took special interest in me as a principal and the charge that I had before me. But one of the things that I always remember is actually being in your kitchen, and he was taking classes, and we got into a discussion about people and trauma and what they're dealing with, and we had broken it down to there's 2 ways to look at it. And his way, if I remember correctly, was always to say, how's that working for you? The Dr. Phil. You know, no matter where you are right now and how you're acting out, how's that working for you? And I was always in the field, and still am, of what happened to you. Let's go all the way back. I can't start today. I got to go all the way back and find out where you are. Yes. So for you in processing, you know, Nathan and all that he meant to you and to your family, how do you think he would have encouraged you to work through this?
That's a very
What do you
interesting
think
question.
he would have wanted for you and for the kids in terms of processing?
I think he would have wanted me to do what I'm doing, to engage in the processing. Now, of course, when you said that, I thought, oh goodness, because he was a behaviorist, how's that working for you? That's the behavior part of that. But you kind of like, you almost have like a psychology mind, like that Freudian, like
Right.
psychoanalyst. And so that's kind of funny. But I think that he would have absolutely said, listen, you do what you need to do. You do you. And yeah, it's so funny. We had a conversation not shortly, honestly, before he died. And he's like, listen, I thought, I was teasing him. I said, listen, I've been good to you. If something ever happens to me, listen, I just want you to know I've been good to you. And then we started talking about like having somebody else. And he's like, no, I'd love for you to just do you, do your life, and whatever that means. And I know he meant it. And that's one of the reasons why I did do some of the eulogy at his funeral, because I really wanted people to know that he was who they thought he was. And who better to say that than his wife? So, and I said that unashamedly, proudly.
I remember,
Proudly.
Gasping when I saw you go up there, because I thought, is she going to be able to do this?
Yeah.
I knew you would. I knew you would, but I knew that was very important for you, for the family, and just a wonderful tribute to him.
Yes, I felt like I had to. I feel like the day would not have been complete had I not allowed people to know who he really was.
A great man. Okay, so as we move forward, as you continue to take steps and move on in different ways, let's talk about this self-care. Yes. Right before the break, I said it's like water. Everybody's self-care Saturday, self-care Sunday, self-care afternoon. I'm doing self-care. Now, I'm not making light of it because I think I called it Mental Health Day, but my husband can attest to, I have always known when I was out of balance. I have always known when things weren't right and I needed to step away. And sometimes that was for a half a day. Sometimes that was keep the kids to the end of daycare. Sometimes it was a Saturday. And as I've grown older and my kids have, sometimes I'm going to check into a hotel for the weekend all by myself. So I don't want to diminish the importance of that now. But what does self-care mean to you?
When I was in school, because of the nature of the work that we do, I had an entire class on self-care for 6 weeks. I have been a contributor to a book that we wrote with my cohort for school. So yes, self-care is important. Now I will tell you, the way that I grew up, it was like, that's, girl, whatever. But, and then for me personally, I just felt like this sounds a bit selfish for me, honestly. But what self-care is, it is taking what you need to be the best that you can be. And there are levels to this. I was talking to my brother-in-law, and he says, oh, yeah, I exercise and what have you. And I thought, well, that's just one component of self-care, right? So I have led a few classes after school for faculty and staff about self-care. I have distributed information about it, and I even had them to engage in, hey, what does self-care look like for you? Because it's going to look different for everybody. However, I would encourage people to do the facets, so there's emotional self-care, there is physical self-care, there is mental self-care, and it's really when you're doing all of these things that when you are taking care of yourself, that you are, in my opinion, living your best life. So that's what that looks like. And so your self-care is maybe different from mine. For me, it is journaling. I was introduced to Pinterest by one of my really good friends. And I pin all the time. But that looked like I exercise probably 5 days a week. and just mentally, if I need to process with somebody, I've sat with a therapist, and he's like, hey, what is it that you need? And asking yourself that question, what is it that you feel like you need to be the best you, right? So even in my career, what does this look like for me in self-care in the career that I have? So thinking about it in all those levels.
How do we teach our children to do it? Now, of course, the most excellent way would be as a model. But, even then, my daughter would see me go off and get a massage, and I say, this is, mama's mental health time. I got to go. And she couldn't go right behind me. But how do we get our children who are still processing through trauma, processing through grief, to know that it's important, even when you're not, to take time.
I think it's the awareness. And I was actually talking to my daughter yesterday, and she says she's having a situation with a friend, and she kept saying, I don't know what it is about what she said or what she's doing that's bothering me. And as a person in my field, I'm like, she's aware. This awareness is great, and you're laughing, but honestly, to be emotionally intelligent enough to say, okay, something is off. It's bothering me.
Okay, but listen, that is, as you said, it's self-awareness, self-actualization, the highest level of Maslow's, right?
Yes.
And everything else. And it is a blessing when you're able to reach that level. But so many of our children, so many of our families are not there. How do we, it's self-care. Girl, I'm going to the concert. I'm going to, Mike Epps. That's what I got to do for myself.
And I'm not going to say that is not their self-care, right? But the way that so one of the definitions of trauma is that you have overwhelmed my ability to cope, right? And so what then becomes one of the ways to self-care and to deal with trauma or to deal with it after you've processed it, is to have healthy coping skills. And self-care are also healthy coping skills. And so to ask your child, if they're even 5, if they're frustrated and they can't tie their shoe, what is it that you feel like you need right now? Really language. I read the book, Permission to Feel. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I suggest everybody to read it. But giving children language to say, I'm not just mad, sad.
Oh, happy and scared, right.
This is frustrating me because I can't tie, because, I'm having trouble tying my shoe. Mom, I feel really down today because I got this on my test, and allowing them to say that and process that, not like, oh, well, you'll do better, or what did you do to study? Like, no, okay. I'm given time and language to be able to say this blank me, So does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. One of the things that I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things that we've done a lot with in schools, and I'm still trying to do out in the community, is talk about that language, identifying the feelings. So I'm a big person, own your feelings. How are you feeling? What are you feeling? And so we move from, what's wrong with you to what happened to you, allowing them to speak. But that next piece, what is it you feel like you need right now?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes, and the way we tried to shortcut that was, we'd get the call to the classroom, this child's being disruptive, and we'd go, and the first thing we'd say is, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. And do you need time to cool down?
That's wonderful.
But I love being able to say, too, what do you feel like you need? And sometimes, when people think about volunteering or helping in school, it would be such a blessing if we had adults, greeting students in the morning and looking for those triggered faces.
Yes.
And we're able to say, what do you need right now? What do you need today? And sometimes, a child just needs to go and be by themselves and cry for a little while. get over it, and I'm fine. But to start with all that angst isn't good for anybody. So I love that thought of asking that question and giving kids the language.
Absolutely. And I think, too, one of the things that I think the school system really wants people, I'm sorry, not people, but students to do is regulate their emotions. But oftentimes you cannot regulate what you don't have cognitively or even the verbiage to regulate.
Right.
In order for me to regulate happy, mad, sad, frustrated, embarrassed, I have to know first that I'm embarrassed. So, and then oftentimes we have to be giving permission to feel that, because oftentimes traumatic children who are, has experienced a lot of trauma is that they've not been given that permission to feel. It's just been stuff down. And so you're coming to school with a lot of angst and anxiety, and students may not even know that it's anxiety. I remember that I experienced anxiety when I was in the 2nd grade, but it wasn't until I went to school and I thought, those thoughts, those butterflies in my stomach, it was anxiety. Oh my gosh. And so realizing that at that time, but so how wonderful would it be if we gave children now that verbiage, those understanding, that awareness to say, I'm anxious right now. Let's think about why I'm anxious.
Let's think about what I'm really feeling, how that comes across, and being intentional about teaching that. You know?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing more important. And you talked about, regulation of feelings from students, but we also know that, as adults, we very often don't do that, and that's a trigger for some of our students. But in this last few minutes that we have, and what has been healing for me, anytime I talk to like-minded people and people that I respect, it is like medicine. It's like healing, even better than that. But talk to me about the kids. And I wonder, and it sounds like you all have done an excellent job of processing, and you've been there all along helping them do that. But I always wonder about the Skittle moments. So I always have, I call them that.
Give me some context around Skittle moments.
So a story, Beth Moore, biblical teacher, she tells a story right after Hurricane Katrina. She went to the Houston Dome to help families who had been displaced and were there. And she went and worked with one family, and the family decided to go out for the day to buy some things, essentials that they needed before coming back to the Dome. And while they were out, she learned from all the children and the aunts in this family about how strong this mom was. That during Hurricane Katrina, she was up on the roof. She had to pull the family up. She had to leave her dad behind, and he died. She was the one that kept it together and was so strong the whole time, and she was just this wonderful woman. So they're out, they buy their necessities, they come back to the Dome, and as they're entering the Dome, they all have to be searched. And you're not supposed to bring anything back into the Dome that is food of any sort. And so they're going through, and the guard looks inside of her purse and sees that she has Skittles. And he says, you can't bring those in here. And she says, no, I'm going to bring these in here. And he says, no, ma'am, you can't bring in Skittles. And no, I'm bringing in Skittles. And she, of course, has this whole meltdown to the point that Beth is just like, let her have her Skittles, please. She's been through so much. And so I've termed that just the Skittles moment, that eventually, if you don't process, you're going to have that Skittles moment. I see it all the time with others, but I'm wondering about the kids. I'm wondering about, do you feel like they have processed this fully? And have there been Skittle moments for you or for them?
When you say process fully, I think that's an ongoing thing. I think that's a misnomer. So please know that there is no, okay, we're good. We're done. Yeah, we're good now. Yeah, of course there are Skittle moments. And please help parents know that there will be Skittle moments all throughout your life. Even if you haven't lost anyone, if there's been any trauma in your life, you're going to have a Skittle moment. Hopefully you will lessen your triggers, and hopefully you know what a trigger is. But yeah, there are going to be Skittle moments. And yes, there has been Skittle moments. I'm hoping I'll have to ask for forgiveness because I'm not asking for permission. But I don't think she would mind sharing this. My daughter went past the house that my late husband was in when he passed away, and she called me, and this was just 2 weeks ago. And she was sobbing, and I thought, oh my God, what's wrong? Have you been in an accident? What's the problem? And she just processed that moment of seeing the house, and that's not the first time she's seen it since he passed away.
But it was on this occasion.
It was on that occasion. She was by herself. I guess she was driving. You know, she was very young when he passed away. So yes, there will be Skittle moments, and they're going to happen. And I'm so thankful because of therapy, because that I have attempted, and I'm not saying that I'm a pro at this, but I've attempted to engage my own feelings, the feelings of my children, that I could sit and I could listen and say, tell me all about it.
So tell us the good news. What are some great things that are happening for you and your children today?
Oh, all my children like each other.
That's
and you know
beautiful.
what? It really is.
Yes.
They love one another. We generally take a vacation every year, and we have a great time together. We really do. My daughter's graduating high school, and then I have a son graduating college.
Yes,
Woo-hoo.
yes.
And you know what? You know what I can say? Someone asked me about who my lighthouses were. I don't know if you've seen the TED Talk of a guy. He was a foster child. It was actually, I seen it at my school, and they were encouraging us to be lighthouses. And after I looked at it, what he was saying was there are different people in his life at different times who provided a way to cope, to do whatever he needed to be or needed at that time, and to help him to become who he was at that moment. And I said to myself, you know what? My children are lighthouses to me. It seems backwards, but they are. It may seem backwards, maybe not, but they are lighthouses to me, and they keep me moving forward. And I know that each one of them love me. That's amazing to me. They know that I love them, but for me to know that they love their mother. I get texts sometimes. I get poems from my daughter, who's a wonderful writer. It's just amazing. It really is amazing. So on Valentine's Day, we'll finish up with this. I have each of my children to say what they love about each other. I thought, you know, how wonderful it is to have somebody that you love, that you've lived with, tell you something that they admire about yourself. And so just going through that process and hearing, and I'm a crier, so I cried, but hearing all of my children say what they loved about their mother, it was wonderful. Yeah. So.
Well, I know they told the truth, because it's the same thing that I love about you, and I bet you love about our guest today. Just being honest and sharing with us something that has happened to her as a tragedy, as a trauma, but she's been able to share just all of God's blessings that have grown out of it, how she's grown as a person, how her kids have grown, and how she's encouraging you to grow, to get help, to learn what you can and take away what you can from today. Even the smallest nugget, hopefully it makes a difference in your life. I'm Michelle Pennix. It has been my pleasure as Principal Pennix to welcome you to the principal's office again this week. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, with another episode. Until then, and as always, to God be the glory.